that kind of a turn is coming on October 25th in reverse. We're into this release language now, all about the economic situation, and the dollar is starting to get a little bit waffly, and things are starting to get a little strange. There's all the hyping on the flu. There's all these various different kinds of release language showing up in the media and bombarding everybody with this media overdose. And something is going to turn on October 25 and put us into one of those period of times when everybody's really tense. So if this were back in 1962, I would suggest, okay, on 10/25 is the day we find out about the Cuban Missile Crisis. And then we're going to go through 10 or 10 and a half days of that building tension feeling before we get into the sawtooth pattern of release, build, which is much more normal in our work. Usually we're into this kind of crocodile teeth, up and down, nothing too regular, but nothing too shocking either. And for us, this 10/25th date is October 25th, really is a little bit on the order of, I don't know that there's going to be an event per se, but something certainly is going to change the perception and use of the language from that point in a rather rapid and virtually straight-up fashion into building tension for 10 days. And it could relate to, I'd hate to say it, but it could relate to an Israeli attack on Iran. It could be the real beginning of the crash in the banking system. It might be a 10-day bank holiday, something that would grab people viscerally and make them very tense, irritable, dangerous, probably will exacerbate all kinds of irrational behavior over those 10 days just from the stress and the tension. And at this point, we have so many data points, we can't say, well, it's more likely, bank holiday as opposed to attack on Iran. They're about equally weighted in the data we've got, so I can't pick one, if that makes any sense.
Right. Could it be a false flag attack here on United States soil?
It could indeed, but it would have to be of such an order of magnitude that it's going to, basically, that it would have to be of such an order of magnitude that it would have the same level of effect as was felt around the planet for the first couple of days in September of 2001. So within those first couple of days, we had this strange, not strange, but rather predictable and gratifying and nice shift where everybody liked America for a couple of days before we started getting belligerent and the powers that be took over and changed all of that. But the turn that we would have now would have to be planetary. So if that were going to be the case, then it would have to be a very severe attack. And there are reasons to suspect that that can't be done anymore. The reason to suspect that is the sheer amount of people out there now in such a relatively short period of time to the event that are out there disputing the official facts, official broadcast version of the, quote, facts around the September 11th attacks in 2001. There seems to be a critical mass of individuals such that this issue will not go away, and it will totally dominate, if there's any kind of an election, many areas in 2010. A lot of the so-called truth movement will become a real thorn in the side of the mainstream media. So there's a reason to suspect that another false flag attack could not be as effective simply because so many people would instantly start doubting it, if that makes any sense. If you kind of know they're lying to you, you're not even going to fall for it for a few minutes. And so we're seeing something that's, for 10 days it holds at that same level. So it kind of argues against a false flag attack, simply because I would suspect, even if that were not the case, if the U.S. was attacked in a terrorist fashion now, within the same day you'd have a wave of conspiracy researchers all over the idea or all over the facts of the case.
Well, that's good to know on that point, but what about...
It doesn't mean that they wouldn't do it. Right, I agree with you. It's good to know, because I've seen some of this language circulating in official, or not official, but in publications relating to the Council from Foreign Relations. The CFR is like a middle-level management training course from the great minions to the powers that be rise up into our political elite. So if you pay attention to what the CFR does and all their position papers and look at the language in there, you get a particular view of the world from the powers that be viewpoint, at least the rising stars thereof. And they're of the opinion, there's a lot of language leaking out, that suggests that they would be too afraid, I would think, of that instant response, of a backlash of unknown proportions to that kind of an attack.
Well, that's good. You got to, the American people are waking up like I've never seen in my lifetime. And so could it be the collapse of the dollar? Would that bring the emotional level up?
That certainly will, but we've already got that. I'm sorry to say, I hate to put it this way. That's already booked for November 4th or 5th, and it starts on November 4th or 5th in a serious way and runs through to November 2nd of 2010. It takes almost a whole year for it to crash over through the U.S. economy from its actually from the planetary economy, and then down through into the U.S. economy from its status as a global reserve currency. But again, if that were the case, then a trigger event could happen in October on the 25th, but it would have to be of such a level that everybody held their breath for 10 days before we see how it's going to play out. And it's kind of, in a sense, you can envision this where you got two friends of yours that you like equally, and they suddenly start swinging and fighting with each other, and you're kind of torn. You just don't know which one to root for, so to speak, right? And you're not in a position to break up the fight. We're in that kind of an emotional period once the 25th has arrived. So if that were the case, that we're looking at a purely economic stimulus for this emotional turn, then I would have to say that under those circumstances, a good fit might be something like a giant crash in some market somewhere, or a big country going belly up, or something like everybody who ever produces oil anywhere suddenly refusing the dollar. But the issue on all of those, other than the crash itself, is those next 10 days, because those 10 days hold a period of tension that I don't know that I would associate with a crash. There would certainly be a lot of release language associated with the crash, as everybody moans and wails about their loss of their 401k or whatever assets they think they have at risk in this paper market. But it wouldn't necessarily be building tension. So of all of the choices, we keep coming back to the idea that it probably involves international crisis involving military, ours or others, and thus that has a tendency to, when you get real world about it, to point back to the Israelis versus the Iranians, or some playoff of that. There could be an India versus Pakistan kind of an issue. There could be U.S. versus Pakistan, as maybe things deteriorate there, and we're in a situation where we, quote, our interests are threatened, and we have to send in troops into Pakistan and invade them, or something along those lines. Again, we would have to decide at what point does any individual crisis in some of these regions involve the rest of the planet. The reason I bring that up is because the emotional turn that we see derives most of its power from what we call the global pop entity, where we store a proxy for the global populace. So it does look more towards an Israeli-Iran attack kind of a scenario than, for instance, India versus Pakistan unless nuclear was involved, or the U.S. versus Pakistan unless nuclear was involved. In those cases, you could certainly come up with some kind of action thriller script involving, nukes held hostage by some, quote, radical Muslim group in Pakistan, and it takes 10 days to resolve. That kind of thing might work in terms of the building tension, but it would have to get everybody's attention and hold us all riveted there for 10 days to qualify.
Wow. So, well, before I forget, Clif, I'm sorry I should have brought this up earlier. For everybody that's listening, if they would like to get your latest report, why don't you let them know how to do that?
You can go over to halfpasthuman.com and purchase the report right off the main page. It's about, well, right smack in the middle of the top of it. So we have a buy now button, and you can pick it up for $10. And downloads as a PDF file. No paper copies because it runs about 50 pages, and it would just be too much dead trees to do that kind of thing.
And folks, like I said, remember, don't take this all as gospel, but it's a real eye-opener report. So October 25th, if you were preparing, you'd say have everything you plan on getting by then?
It might be very wise. The conditions deteriorate very dramatically after that. We have the 10-day period of time of the tension.